Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the budget work session for Monday, April 30th. I'd like to ask everybody else that can to stand as we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. All right, first item on the agenda is City Manager. If you want to turn to page 53.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Good evening to all the wonderful residents of Bowie. I'd like to start with page 53, City Council budget. The City Council is the governing body of the city, elected by and responsible to the voters for the operation of the city. The council is responsible for municipal policies. The council appoints a city manager, the city attorney, the board of supervisors of elections, all standing advisory committees, special task force groups, and study committees. There are no assigned goals specifically here. There's no significant changes financially to this budget either. Most of the expenses are related to salaries and benefits and the contractual services. And if this falls over into page 54 with the $95,400 for a membership in the Maryland Municipal League, COG, National League of Cities, Prince George's County Municipal Association, and Bowie Chamber of Commerce. That's all we have to say on that, Mr. Mayor. On page 55, the city manager is the chief executive officer, administrative officer for the city. In this case, it's a he. He supervises all staff and is responsible for the effective management of all financial and administrative actions of the city. The manager is appointed by and serves at the pleasure of the city council. He's responsible for implementing all policy matters established by the city council and for the enforcement of city ordinances. The manager keeps the city council informed through a variety of reporting procedures that assist the council in the policy-making role. Our objectives for 18 were to continue to work with the staff to keep the strategic objectives adopted by the City Council in July of 16 in mind, carried out on the day-to-day operations of the city. Staff continues to focus on the objectives established by the plan to guide the day-to-day activities. B, work with the communications manager to finalize and implement a new and more extensive Bowie communications plan or public information plan. That plan was adopted and placed in operation on September the 14th, 2017, and copies were forwarded to you all over the weekend. C, continue to focus on the Bowie Golf Course to restructure the lease, improve infrastructure, and work toward implementing best practices at this facility. The Parks and Grounds Superintendent has completed the majority of the improvements for this CIP listed on page 251. Because of cost savings obtained, additional improvements have been implemented. Also, there is an additional $250,000 allocated in this year's budget in the CIP for the Bowie Golf Course. D, work with developer, Prince George's County, and city staff to establish the tax increment financing district and to complete the annexation of the South Lake, formerly called Carrington property, into the city of Bowie. The staff continues to work with Prince George's County and developers for South Lake to reach a consensus on the conditions that must be met to establish the tax incremental financing district, otherwise called the TIF, and subsequently annex the property into the city. If an agreement can be reached, we anticipate late spring at springtime frame for the TIP. There's a bit of an update on that since we wrote this document. The project is at a standstill. Both the county and the city are still trying to work out a feasible situation with the property owner. Of course, the developer and his partner have separated ways. We're waiting on them, I suspect, to develop another partnership so we can continue the process. But the project is not dead, but is rather dormant right now. We've initiated some calls to but we're waiting on some responses. On page 56, we've listed the objectives for 2019. We'll continue to focus on the Bowie Golf Course to improve the infrastructure and work toward improving the management practices at the golf course. 2 will be continue to work with Prince George's County, the developer, and other city staff to establish a tax incremental financing district and complete the annexation of South Lake, formerly called Carrington. Also, continue to refine, implement, and update and improve the city's communication plan. 4, complete negotiations with the Teamsters Union, who intended to represent the city's call takers, which is, that negotiation is still ongoing right now. Significant changes in the city manager's budget. The new business operations office was created from the communications unit of the city manager's office. This position of the business operations manager, executive office associate, administrative assistant, and receptionist have been moved to the business operations office, which is another section of the city manager's budget, and we'll get to that later on. And that's Ms. Pizzurto and Joan and Irma and Alvina and Alice. So that's a significant action there. If you look at on bottom of 56 there, you'll see that as a result of those adjustments, the FTE number dropped from 9.4 to 6.4, but they're going to appear in a few pages over. Most of the expenses here are related to personnel and fringe benefits, with a significant amount there in municipal grants, which houses the community development block grants and the community legacy program managed by Mr. Buggs and his team. Any questions on?
Hey, Mr. City Manager, good to see you tonight.
Hey, sir, how are you?
I am well, other than allergies murdering me, but I'm in good company on that one, it looks like. For the Bowie Golf Course, I know we talked about this briefly when we went over CIPs before. I just wanted to revisit this quickly. I think we all agree that improvements do need to be made to that location. I'm curious, where are we in our conversations with the current management at the Bowie Golf Course? And I know they've had some setbacks and changes on that front. With regards to, kind of their plan for improving, usership in coming years. We know we have a lot of golf courses in the area, and I know we've talked about this last year a little bit, that, we'd be making some investments in that area. And I also know we talked a little bit before about trying to figure out, how we would work with management to improve their numbers and their membership.
We've just initiated significant conversations with them with the arrival of the new assistant city manager. Mm-hmm. Right where we are with that particular, with the golf course, is that we understand, and they were relieved of their lease responsibilities, as you recall, which we hope would give them some ability to operate further. And of course, they were relieved also of the infrastructure maintenance responsibilities. They are still challenged significantly by the fact that there are so many golf courses, and in order to be competitive, their rates have to be really low, which makes it very difficult for them to make a significant profit. Right now, the outlook for their survivability, unless they're supplemented, doesn't look good. But we're going to work with them and see what we can come up with. But it appears to be a bit of a losing business, failing business, because of the competition. But they're trying hard to keep the facility going. And at some point, if the golf business doesn't improve here, we're going to have to be at a point where we have to completely subsidize this facility or not. But we're going to, that's going to be one of Daniel's assignments, to see what we can do to help them get better at this. But they are a private entity, and we don't get to tell them specifically what to do. We can make suggestions and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think if I'm remembering, going back to last year, a lot of it was kind of a question about, is it a matter of do they have a very loyal membership that's willing to, potentially fork out, considerably higher rates in order to keep the amenity that they enjoy, or is it a matter of keeping the rates competitive to attract additional users from the area?
Well, we
And I know
hope
that's a tough business conversation that they need to have, but I just want to make sure that we are having that conversation with them because it's,
Well, we hope
it
that
is
the
a tough
improvements
business.
that we're making will make the facility more attractive and draw more players. For example, removed all those tree stubs, which were an impediment to the golf course, and improving the greens. And so we've done a lot of things like that. Ed Hall and his people have done a great job, and we're hoping that improves the play at the golf course, and of course, the work we've done with the clubhouse there also. So we'll see.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, as we've seen the last few months, we got all these people playing ice hockey and basketball and pickleball, so obviously we need to encourage the kids to get into golf as well.
Right.
We're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Operation here.
The only other question I had with regards to Carrington, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one, but obviously, if that project comes back to life in the coming months or whatever the case is, I'm sure we'll expect the full complement of hearings and stakeholders meetings prior to any decision on the
Yes,
TIF and
of
all that good
course.
stuff. Cool. Just wanted to hear a yes on that. Thank you so
bet.
much, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. A couple quick questions. Can you give me a copy of the strategic plan that we've got mentioned in A? That would be good for me to take a perusal through.
Sure thing.
Secondly, can you have someone share with me a copy of the last round of information we have on Carrington? It's been a long time since I looked at that. Whatever the background documents are, where it's last been left, recognizing that it's sitting in limbo and not going to be moving anywhere at the moment. I'd still like to sharpen up on that if I could, please.
Sure thing. We'll have Mr. King send an update out to all of you with the supporting documents.
Okay. Thank you kindly.
Any other questions, City Manager? Dr. Trout?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. City Manager. How are you
Hello,
doing?
sir. I'm doing great, thank you.
Have a request, and the request is to help us when we come up, I think on May 7th, we're supposed to be talking about constant yield.
Yes.
And then the following meeting, then we're supposed to be talking about adoption of the budget somewhere thereabouts. What I like to get is something to give us more information about where we are comparing us to other municipalities. And I want to deviate a little bit. In fact, at the conclusion of this meeting, I'm going to give you this sheet of this page that I have right here. And it comes from a previous budget, it's called Budget Policy Guidelines meeting. And this was done in the past. And it looks at roughly maybe about 10 different municipalities in the state of Maryland. And it does two things. One, it tells you what the county tax is, and then it also tells you what the municipal tax is. And when you look at this particular sheet, comparing the municipalities listed are Salisbury, Hagerstown, Greenbelt, Laurel, Frederick, Annapolis, Bowie, Ocean City, Rockville, and Gaithersburg. It gives a different picture from what we're hearing as far as the noise level about the increase in taxes. Seen some stuff in next door neighbor, Pointer Ridge, that was not flattering as far as where we are in making a comparison between where we are as a city and comparing it to other municipalities. Because when you look at this document here, it gives a different picture. I mean, because we're talking about 11.7% increase, which was floated around, and that was what was focused in on. But when you look at it, it shows that really, and this is showing what the current situation is of Bowie, and that's at 40 cents, and we're looking at going to 43 cents. And actually, Bowie, out of all these municipalities, has the third lowest tax rate of all the municipalities. I want to have this introduced, and I also like to have it massaged a little bit. I don't think we really need to have Salisbury or Hagerstown there. I'd like to take those out and insert some of the municipalities, some of the other municipalities from the 27 municipalities that lie within Prince George's County. For example, give me a town from the port towns, the largest one of the port cities, give me one of those. Give me what lists College Park, and then also, another municipality within Prince George County so that we can have a better view of where we are in relationship to the other municipalities as far as taxing on our residents. Because when you look at this particular document here, it gives a completely different story than what is being echoed throughout the community. And what's being echoed throughout the community is Bowie is the largest taxable entity in this area. And that's just not true, according to the numbers here. So that's what I'd like to get some information on that. And then also, I'd like for us to focus in on page 43 of this budget. Not 43, 31 of this budget. Because 31 on this budget really tells us gives us a good picture of what I'm talking about as far as the real property rates. Because when you look at 2019, even at the 43 cents, and you look all the way over on the right-hand side, you'll see that the tax rate is only going up, the total in tax rate is only going up 2 cents and not 3 cents, because our tax differential offsets a lot of what the county, other entities outside of Bowie is paying. They're paying a higher rate for county rate than we are. I need to have this story told, bottom line.
Thanks, sir. Any other questions on those? Let's go to Human Resources on 58.
All right then. The Human Resources Office provides service support and staffing solutions to the city operations, taking a leading role in vital areas such as talent acquisition, employee and labor relations, benefits administration, performance management, and compensation analysis, and is a primary objective to ensure that primary objective of this office is to ensure that the city of Bowie maintains its most talented and highly engaged and well-equipped staff as possible. Objectives for 18 were to provide the city's citywide supervisor training by October 31st, 2017. This project will be completed by June 30th of this year. That March 31 has been passed, has been superseded. Complete munis migration process by February 28th. That's been moved to 30th June, and that'll be completed at that time. And the workload information is relatively unchanged. The objective for 19 will be to complete policy reviews of drug and alcohol, short-term disability, EEO, ADA, discipline, attendance, and grievance policies by June 30, 2019. Complete 8 employee wellness activities, including lunch learning seminars, health fairs, employee challenges by June 30, 2019. Significant change in this particular budget is the reclassification of the administrative assistant grade from 110 to 111, which has a $2,259 cost. That's been adjusted based on that employee's, that position's responsibilities and accountability. So the FTE is still 5. Most of the expenses in this section of the city manager's budget are personnel and fringe benefits, with some contractual expenses related to physical exams and all the things it takes to bring a new employee on board. Any questions about human resources?
Yes.
Human Resources, Dr. Trout.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, under objectives for 2019, item number 1, it says complete policy review of drug and alcohol plus. Where it says drug, can we put a parenthesis there, open parenthesis, and put opioids, and then put a closed parenthesis? The reason I'm asking for that is because twofold. One, it's something that is one of the priorities of the governor of the state of Maryland, and two, it's also a priority of the president of the Maryland Municipal League. So I'm asking that we really focus in on that. Just not say drugs, but in parentheses, open, close, opioids. And
Well,
then
sir,
say alcohol.
we can put some emphasis on opioid, no problem.
Right.
One thing I also want to add here, Mr. Mayor, is that we need to add another $25,000 to the services line, professional services line. for staff training. We're initiating a program where we want to have concentrated training for our employees, everything from sexual harassment training to new supervisor training, and I'd like to put that in.
And where would that go?
Professional services. Contractual
Okay.
services. Any other questions on that, Mr. Mayor?
You good?
Yeah.
Ms. Glass?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding objective number 1, when was the last review of these policies?
We have not had a review on these policies in the last couple of years. So as the city manager mentioned, we are going to have a comprehensive training series on these and a number of the key policies in the city.
Okay, and also, I heard what you said about adding the money for the sexual harassment. Can we also add that into the objective for sexual harassment training?
Yes,
policy
absolutely.
review? Thank you.
Any other question? Elections, 60. Not a lot there for this year. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, let's see what he's got to say, and then we'll go for it. Anything on elections?
Human resource. On human resource.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about this one.
Oh,
Go.
no. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question on human resources. I know we haven't gotten to this, well, we're in human resources. I think that, this human resources director, Mr. Haley, and I have had a conversation about this. The services that are offered are the fringe benefits to citywide employees, Mr. City Manager, such as the FICA contributions and, the unemployment compensations, workers' comp, hospitalization, medical, health, all of those benefits and prescription plan. We have one particular firm that manages all of that for the city?
We have one broker.
One broker.
Who negotiates the health benefits in particular. Health and dental.
Okay. My question is, I want to know how likely or if we will be sending that back out for bid. I understand that this vendor or broker had been in place for a significant number of years, maybe 10 or more years. And with the competition in the market, the healthcare market, we may be able to negotiate better prices for the city and its employees. So I just was wondering if we would be sending that out for public bid soon. And if so, that's a question. That's a question, Mr. City Manager.
Well, I mean, that issue hadn't come up as far whether we were going to bid that out or seek other, different proposals. We can do that, though. I mean, it's certainly one way to find out if we're getting a good deal, if we compare our other bids or proposals.
I'm just on a personal note. I know many of you know that I work with the city of Gary, Indiana, and they recently did this for their employees, and when it came back, they were at somewhere at about a 48% savings from, so 48% is significant. It's like massive.
Well,
so I don't know if we'll get those same sort of benefits, but I would just like to explore the possibilities. That's all.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, I've negotiated 2 changes to health plans where we use different brokers. We could negotiate we could ask for proposals when the time comes and to see if we can get a like offer or better for our employees, which is what we want, right?
Yes,
From
sir.
somebody else.
Correct.
I've been informed that that this broker gets a percentage of their overall expenditures, which is about $90,000 in the course of a year. And if it's the council's wish, we can seek proposals in the next open period and see what happens.
Okay. Do we currently have a contract? And if so, if we could explore when that contract expires.
It's my understanding that there's been no contract. We have a working arrangement with them,
Okay,
with this broker,
okay.
and it's been there for years.
Well, I would like maybe perhaps, and maybe my colleagues may even want to join in on that, maybe solidifying a contract and then, or first putting it out for bid and then working to negotiate the best possible prices for our employees as well as overall costs for the city of Bowie. And then enter into a contractual agreement with whomever provides the better service at the better cost.
Well, what we can do, I think, is request proposals.
Absolutely.
In this issue and see what comes back, and we can do that, for sure.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank
Hear
you
no
very much.
objections.
I hear no objections.
No
Oh,
objections.
Ms. Glass had a question.
Ms. Class and then Mr. Stev had a question.
One question that is actually not on this particular subject, but still falls under human resources. Is that
Okay.
okay? I wanted to see if there has been any survey or you all have done any review regarding any, this is a very now question, but any differences in compensation of our employees defined by gender.
No, we have not done that. We recently had a classification compensation done on all of our positions, but not specifically on gender.
And would you be able to do something small or give me some type of information offline?
Well, we can, why don't we put that, I'd be willing to volunteer to make that an objective for the HR department to do a survey. We should be able to do that within the constraints of our budget or my contingency.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Stev, okay. Any other questions, human resources, elections?
Okay. Elections. This activity provides administrative, secretarial, and clerical services to the city elections, voter registration, records keeping, and furnishes voting and registration information to Bowie residents and other governmental bodies and agencies. The objectives of this activity are to encourage all other eligible residents of the city of Bowie to register and vote in all city elections, provide adequate information to the residents, and continually improve and update the city's voting regulations and records. In 18, there was one particular goal with a couple of components. Continue working with the County Board of Elections to maintain updated voter registration lists as well as street lists. This objective ongoing through the year. There's a note here regarding the November 16th petition that was presented regarding the recall and the subsequent election of Councilman Wolfley, and that, it's reasonable to say that our election operation has been in full swing for this past year and performed admirably, for sure. And it should be noted that the FTE is one deep in this particular area, and of course with our wonderful residents working for us on the Board of Elections. For the objectives for 2019, working on updating this Chapter 6 of elections of the City Code and Section 2137 of the City Charter, with recommendations presented to the City Council by the Board of Elections in June of, that would be next year, correct? June of 2019. Continue working with the County Board of Elections to maintain updated voter and registrations lists as well as street lists, and that's a major effort. And of course, with the primaries and such coming up in the county, it's going to be tough to get things out of them in the future. There are no significant budget changes and in this particular budget. Any questions about elections?
Question about election? Mr. Stev.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We discussed this a couple months ago, and I just wanted to bring it up again now to see if we potentially add this as an objective. But one of the things that I've heard in talking directly to members of the Board of Elections as well as residents and some of my colleagues is that because our residents are, as you described, making full use of the election process in recent years, There are some areas where our actual election code, which was written many decades ago, hasn't been updated in a while, seems to be running into a little bit of friction where there have been just areas of confusion or uncertainty, or whatever the case may be. And I'm wondering if we can make as one of our objectives for next year moving forward is having our Board of Elections actually sit down, review the extent of the election code, which I imagine will be a bit of a process, and working with their counsel, and if they're open, potentially, opening up some public conversations as well as they're able, to ironing out some areas in election code where there might be any confusion or uncertainty or anything that simply might just need to be updated. Is that something that you think would be reasonable as an objective?
Go ahead.
Well, that is part of what the current objective that I have there, Chapter 6 elections. Overall, there were some recommendations that the board presented to council based on some of your requests. So it was trying to finish implementing those. And then, like you said, we could look into the other things. I do know that that code does need to get a lot of updates on it. So that, yes, that is something that we could work on and try to update the other aspects of it.
Cool, I appreciate that, Mr. Hernandez.
Mr. Wolfman?
Thanks for all the good work that you do on this. I know it's no small task, and you face some pressing challenges in terms of time to get things done and passed, so thank you. The question I have is, first of all, I'd like to echo the comments, Councilman Estev, regarding what we can do to revisit just to get a better understanding in the community. I think it builds a lot more confidence in the process when everybody has a better understanding of the rules and making sure that the ambiguities are cleared out. Also, could you, since I wasn't a party to the discussions, could you share with me a copy of the recommendations that were last presented?
Sure.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions on the election? Dr. Trout and then Ms. Class.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess this question to the clerk, the city clerk. How you doing? In my discussions with some of the residents about the recall vote, one thing that came up that I'd like for you to take a look at to see if it makes sense. When you have a recall and you're looking to get the signatures, it was felt that you probably would want to go with the signatures from the most recent election, as opposed to just looking at the totality. Because if you're going to do a recall, shouldn't you be doing a recall based upon the most recent vote? So that's illegal. My question, and I'd like for us to get some feedback to see if we can look at that, because my understanding is we didn't do that. Now, I might be wrong with that. If that's the case, then I do apologize.
Are you referring to whether it was signatures from active versus inactive voters? Or I'm not quite understanding what you mean by voters that voted last.
I'm not really sure if I guess you could say inactive voters, but this is what I'd call inactive voters. Here's a scenario that I'm looking at, and I know this has happened in several cases. You'll have someone that voted in 2013, but they didn't vote in 2015, and the recall is for 2015 voters. So that person who voted in 2013 but did not vote in 2015 shouldn't be eligible for the recall for 2015 because they didn't vote in 2013. I mean, they didn't vote in 2015, they voted in 2013.
Mr. Trout, Dr. Trout, I think we need to check with our attorney.
Yeah,
I
because-
think you'd have a problem enforcing something like that.
Yeah, I'd say our charter right now just
think it's
says
open to all
registered
eligible voters.
voters.
All eligible voters.
All registered voters are able to sign the petition. It does not state whether they were active in 2013, but not in 2015. As of right now, it just states that all registered voters within the city. So if they're in the registered books and that we get from the county, whether they're active or inactive,
Okay,
I
so that
mean,
means,
so that's something that we
Yeah.
probably would have to be looked at by the attorney and by yourselves if you're considering to make some sort of charter amendment
Right.
to be specific in wording for recall elections.
Right, 'cause
Or
this
any
was-
other elections.
agreed, this was brought to my attention, and I'm just bringing it to our attention as fruitful thought. Like I said, I don't know if it's correct, but I was told that this is what we do, and if that's what we do, if we've done that in the past, are we gonna do it in the future? What are the ramifications of doing it that way versus doing it another way? I'm just
If we're gonna do-
asking for
yeah, well,
information.
If we're gonna do this update, have the elections committee look at it, I mean, they can certainly look at that, but I think there's some serious legal implications there, maybe some constitutional implications.
Right, I don't know that, but all
I
I'm
know, I
asking.
understand the
Yeah, I'm
question.
just asking them to look at it.
I understand
since-
the question.
yeah.
Ms. Klaus?
Just based off of that question, I would say that based off of professional knowledge, but not holding myself out to anything, that would be unconstitutional. But I'm sure we'll defer to our city council. I wanted to find out, what was the total cost for the special election and the recall election?
Between both of them, the December election was about 11,600, and the election in March was about 20,075. So together was about close to $32,000.
And also, this probably would have been a better question to ask back on page 53 than the city council budget, but I think it would follow logically that during the time that there was no District 2 representation, that salary or the compensation, where would it have gone? Back into general fund or? Okay. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Did you have another? Okay. All right, legal services?
Staff. The city attorney attends council meetings, represents the city in legal proceedings, both before courts and administrative agencies, reviews contracts, leases, covenants, and prepares ordinances and resolutions. The office also provides advice to the city and state legislation where required. The city retains several law firms with differing specialties to handle such matters as bond issues, IRS tax issues. Separate legal counsel is also retained to support the Ethics Committee and the Board of Personnel Appeals, telecommunications legislation, cable franchise renewal processes. The city is also represented without cost beyond payment of premium by attorneys appointed by the local government insurance trust to represent the city in connection with the defense of certain civil actions. There are no significant budget changes here, and there are no personnel here. This is $200,000 professional services. Any questions?
Questions on legal services? Mr. Seth?
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Una Cooper for her tremendous work in the communications realm. The improvement that we've seen as far as social media outreach across the board has been really excellent. The newsletter's fantastic. The news flash is online and it's regularly updated. And I hear regularly from residents that they so appreciate the improvements that we've made there and that you've overseen in the last several weeks and months. We know it's never perfect. There's always going to be someone who says they didn't hear X, Y, or Z. But I feel extremely confident knowing that when I push people to buoy alerts and to sign up for city notifications, that they're going to be in really good hands. So I just want to say a big thank you for that.
The other one? You have a question? Go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take the opportunity to also echo what my colleague Mike Steph says about our communications director, Ms. Una Cooper. She does a fantastic job at putting the word out and getting messaging across, and many residents have always come to me and said to me and appreciated the fine job that you do, Ms. Cooper. I just want to echo it and say it from my heart, my deepest
Good.
gratitude. Thank you, Ms. Cooper.
All right, any questions on legal side? Hearing none. Communications?
Well, the Communications Division, formerly known as the Public Information, is responsible for providing residents with current information on city events, services through the monthly newsletter, press releases, city website, social media, and cable television. It also broadcasts the city's council meetings and special events. The function related to the central support of the office supplies, copiers, printers, graphics, postage, and mailings previously provided by this office are now a part of the Business Operations Division, and we'll get to that later on. On the objective for 18, what we had a mission to improve our communications with the residents, and after an evaluation of the alternatives, the city expanded its social media offerings to include Instagram, and one of the preferred tools for teens and young adults. And a short document summarizing city services has been created and is now being distributed to residents via the local real estate offices. B was to expand compatibility of our audio-video capabilities in the chamber and in the main meeting rooms, 243 and 181, as well as the conference rooms throughout the City Hall by April 2018. Enhancements are in place in the city, in the chamber, council chambers, and rooms 243, 181 to allow for wireless connectivity and allow multiple laptops to be connected to the presentation equipment simultaneously. C was to increase the hard drive capacity for HD recordings by December 30, 2017, and a new high-capacity solution is now in place. Of significant note here, well, let me finish. Objectives for 2019 are to improve communications by expanding the monthly news flash to become a true electronic newsletter with graphics and interactive links to video and websites. Number 2, to measure resident satisfaction with city services and program by conducting a resident survey. 3, to enhance outreach efforts with increased use of video on government channel, city website, and social media. Reclassification and upgrade of the public access specialist 110 position to a broadcast specialist 114 is in place, is proposed with a net increase of $18,000. This will give us $18,717. This will give us an increased capacity for production and production management that we don't have right now, and subsequently give us an opportunity to better communicate with our residents. If you'll notice that one position, which was formerly the administrative associate under FTEs, has been moved to business management, business operations, and now instead of 6.1, there are 5.1 people in this particular division. The primary expenses are personnel and of course fringe benefits, with significant expenditures. If you look at the bottom of page 64 on machinery and equipment, and at this point I'll open for questions regarding communications.
Question on communications, Mr. Wolfley?
Thank you. Quick question. We have a printing and binding cost for $26,000 for our newsletter. Where are we distributing those newsletters, the printed versions?
Good evening. The $26,000, a majority of that is for printing the Spotlight Monthly in the Bowie Blade. And then the printed copies that are more like regular printed copies are at all of the city facilities. It's delivered to the senior apartments in the city, the 2 libraries, and, well, here at City Hall as well.
Okay. I know that when I was out on the campaign trail, there was a lot of discussion about keeping in touch, and I came across, frankly, a lot of people who prefer to get their information from a variety of methods. Not all of them are inclined to catch an email or a e-newsletter, that sort of thing like that. Can you look into what the expense would be for resurrecting a quarterly distribution through the mails for the Spotlight?
Yes, I have done some, we can do quarterly. We've done some preliminary numbers. And to do it monthly would be about $120,000 for printing and mailing, something similar to what we did before. So that was for 12. If you divide that by 3, you would get a quarterly.
Okay.
So, yeah, 40,000.
So about 40,000.
Yeah, but I honestly, to do it quarterly, that would be tough because I'm not sure that it would be current enough for our residents. You know, that would assume that they would hold on to it for 3 months and everything that was going to happen in the next 3 months would be in there. People have gotten used to, I think, getting more information in a more timely fashion. You know, more often rather than less often.
Sure, sure. All right, so that would be our current format for the newsletter. I am concerned that we do have a fair number of people who are feeling that they should be getting more information, and they just don't ever seem to, you know, tune in to the digital communications we have. And I'd like to move forward with some sort of, you know, mail delivery for our community. But I'm not sure that it needs to be in the same format that we currently have or what we've had in the past. Can you investigate some other alternatives for us that might work out? Maybe that could be an objective, to find some way to reach people who prefer to get a mail-delivered update as opposed to a digital solution.
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Steff?
Sorry, I just want to follow up on that. I apologize for preempting, someone's going to have to turn off their mic. That's all right, thank you. Sorry for preempting legal earlier. I was just very excited about seeing Una. Along the note of the newsletter, I agree with Councilman Wolfley on this one. I don't know that I would support doing something every single month, but, you know, it would require some rethinking as to how we want to use something like a quarterly newsletter. But especially as far as like long-term things that we want residents to know about. I know our police department, oh, there they are. They're working overtime to get like the city's emergency call center number out there. I'm trying to get people signed up for buoy alerts as much as possible. And so to the extent that we could use something like a quarterly newsletter, not just with updates about necessarily events or anything like that, but really to just kind of promote and push the other alternative forms of communication and like the important big things we want people to know about, that would be extremely helpful. It might seem silly mailing 20,000, you know, flyers that, you know, incorporate, you know, a few different things about, you know, the same thing once a quarter, but that's the kind of persistence that I think is going to be required to get people signed up for a lot of the great alternative forms of communication we have out there, is to use the paper to get them onto alternative means. And for those that only use the paper, at least they'll have that and they'll know where they can go for additional information if they want to read more, that sort of a thing. But I just wanted to echo my agreement with Councilman Wolfley.
Thank you. Any other questions? You got it. Ms. Glass?
Very quick question, and also since we're in the communications section, I want to say my own thanks for all that you do and your entire team. You guys are rock stars. Underneath the personal services full-time equivalents, under FY17, there was 0.3 for a part-time intern. Do you all still utilize interns, even not paid or unpaid, excuse me?
We are not at the moment. We had one up through the fall last year. And then things sort of, well, I guess it was through the summer, but we were changing the organization. I hope to again in the future. And this summer, we're going to have some students through the Prince George's County Jobs Program. So they will be paid, but we'll be using them in our office, so.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Any other questions, communication? Business operations, 65.
Yes. The business operations is a new office that's been created by bifurcating the Office of Communications. This office handles critical and high-profile administrative management duties, including negotiating and monitoring the city's cable franchises, telecommunications agreements, and annexation agreements. The Business Operation Office is also responsible for overseeing the city's utilities as well as negotiating and monitoring procurement contracts with various organizations. The office manages various unique and sensitive issues as directed by the city manager. In addition, this office provides central support to all city offices in areas of office supplies, equipment maintenance, printing, and graphic and postage and mailings. And there are no, since it's new, there are no 18 objectives. The objectives for 19 are to expand the INET upgrades to enhance the use of technology to improve performance and provide better customer service and improve delivery of core services on an ongoing basis. Number 2, renegotiate Comcast and Verizon cable franchise agreements. 3, decrease energy expenses of the city of Bowie by the end of 2019 by overseeing the installation of a solar farm on city-owned property, city-owned NCN property. There is no expenditure data to talk about. There are 4 people in the organization, and I mentioned them earlier, Ms. Pizzurto and her team. Most of the expenses are personnel and fringes, and there are some material, supplies, expenses, because as you might remember, they manage that for the city, and postage expenses also, and of course, the $930,000, which involves the $570,000 for the INET upgrade, $60,000 for design and engineering of the CCTV security system, and $300,000 for CCTV equipment. Funding all of these items is through a grant from the city's 2 cable providers, the PEG money. Any questions regarding business operations and?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question, Mr. City Manager. I see here in your workload and performance indicators to where you have provisions for resident complaints and meetings and contracts and agreements. Can someone give me like an example of what sort of residential complaint
Sure.
is identified here? And then from there, I want to ask you too, the 2-part. What sort of meetings and who attends these meetings?
Well, let's take the first one.
Okay.
For example, there is a particular issue in a neighborhood where, I won't talk about specific neighborhoods, but where there is a large ditch running behind the property. The property is owned by the HOA, should be maintained by the HOA. This particular ditch affects the quality of life of 4 or 5 different residents who live there. And so, and this makes for a complex and multi-layered problem that, and that's one of the reasons why I hired Ms. Pizzurto. She's really good at managing problems like that. So what we did was we got the homeowners together, we got the HOA together, we looked at the rules, we looked at the regulations, and we determined who should take the appropriate action to correct the problem that exists on that particular problem, on that particular property. And we put everybody together so they can resolve this, because for the last 15 years or so, the homeowners haven't been able to do it, nobody else has been able to do it.
Okay.
And so when I run into problems, situations that are that complex, that I just can't hand off the code to deal with quickly, but that's complex and multi-layered, and which needs a lot of support from me, and Ms. Pizzurto has the ability to marshal all the forces within our staff to help resolve those issues, to include bring the police involved, code involved, and get everybody into a look at it and see what the real problem was. And that's just one example of those, and we have several of those
Okay.
existing in the city.
Okay, and thank you for that answer, Mr. City Manager. And-
Also, just the second part, since she's involved in the franchise, cable franchise negotiations, we have agreements with Verizon and Comcast. So there are meetings that somebody has to attend that represents the city. Now, this is, you understand what I did was when I got here, Denise Mahoney's office, as an assistant too, had all of this involved in it. And I looked at the organization and split up the responsibilities so that I could focus Ms. Cooper on communications and the operation of our studios and the operation of our PEG channels. And so all the cable franchise negotiation agreement, all the PEG committee meetings, the negotiations with Prince George's County related to cable franchises and our INET and the I'm forgetting that term, the fiber. And the INET and all things associated with it. She attends those meetings or either as a representative of me or we go together, but she's the person who does that for us.
Okay.
As the specific business of the city, using that terminology as a motivator.
Okay, understood. Now, I just wanted to get an idea of the functionality
That's
of the
okay.
department. Okay, I totally got it. Thank you.
Now,
Thank
just
you.
for the record, I discovered Ms. Pizzurto when I went to the Green Team meeting. And when I was a new guy here, and the Green Team are a great group of people, and they're very enthusiastic. They are. And anybody who could ride herd on those people could certainly come up and help us out here in the city manager.
And I happen to be one of those that happens. Well, but I discovered this presenter as well, but through door knocking about 8 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Clarify, whoops. Yeah, this is what happens when all the politicians have a mic. Everyone wants to talk at the same time. There we go. Thanks for joining us tonight, Ms. Pizzuto. One of your main responsibilities, I understand it as well, is basically being our go-between between the city and the many corporate and other private and outside entities that we work with. And I just want to say a big thank you for the work that you're doing on that front. I know that of the 12 resident complaints, I probably forwarded, I think, 11 of those in the last couple of months. I know in the past, as we've dealt with anything from WSSC or PG&E or anything like that, where we've had an issue or an outstanding question, it could often be an incredibly tedious process just getting a basic answer to a question. And I think every time that I forwarded a concern to your office, you guys had a resolution like that. So I remember how scary it was back when you were merely a city activist and you were breaking down my door about something. So knowing how terrifying it must be when you're stomping down the halls of BG&E, figuratively how terrifying that must be for them. So I'm very grateful that you are on our side in representing us to some of these outside partners and entities. And I'm hoping to make sure that more people are aware that your office exists so that as we need to resolve the numerous complaints that we will continue to get or challenges that we have, people will know that they have someone they can go to. So I appreciate your work. Thank you.
This is kudos to both Ms. Pizzuto and also city manager and staff, because the example that you presented to us is something that we have been trying to actually fix for a number of years, and it was quite challenging. And what probably most of you do not know is that Ms. Pizzuto really had to get together with the county's environmental department. She had Adam Ortiz over here, who's the director of that, who's the former mayor of Edmonston. And there was a lot of discussions that was going on with this particular problem, and this is a problem that it really started in 2002. So a lot of work was done on this particular endeavor, and kudos should be given to all that had their hands involved in it. And I sincerely thank you for what you did. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Matty. I neglected to say one thing about, she also manages the use of, there is a move afoot to put telecommunication poles in the right-of-ways.
Yeah.
And so she manages that issue with the attorneys. She's managing the folks who have agreements to put poles on our water tanks and various other things. So she and her team are really busy. And of course, we reinforce her, so she has the power of, to bring people together and coordinate and make things happen. And so,
I like it.
City Clerk, I'm back here again. The City Clerk, the City Clerk's office provides support and services and assistance to the City Council and the City Manager. This office, in conjunction with the Board of Elections, is responsible for making arrangements for the conduct, administration, preparation, and operation of city elections, as well as the update and maintenance of the voters' rolls. The clerk office maintains official records and documents of the city, answers inquiries from outside agencies, citizens, and governmental bodies on behalf of the city. This office also arranges interviews of committee applicants with the city council, prepares and maintains city council calendars, hearing date schedules, city committee rosters, as well as financial disclosure and conflict of interest data. The clerk's office is also responsible for countersigning official city documents, maintaining city seal, setting up meetings for the city council, assisting the city staff in researching projects, as well as gathering material for council packets and performing other related tasks as needed. And as I mentioned earlier, she's a one-man show here, and one-woman show, excuse me. Objectives and results of the fiscal year 2018, work with IT department to better use the Agenda Center software from Civic Plus for electronic creation of agenda packets. And this objective is complete. There are no significant budget changes, and the objective for 19 is to update the city's records retention policy with the Maryland State Archives. So she's our primary point of contact in that. Other than some advertising at $20,000, salaries and wages are the biggest thing in this particular budget, and open for any questions about the city clerk.
Questions, City Clerk? Mr. Stepp?
I just want to say a nice thank you to Awilda. I know that you are very much a one-person show, and you're often our first line of defense when it comes to public-facing things that go well, and things that break and go wrong occasionally. And so you take a lot of heat on our behalf many days out of the week, and I just wanted to express a thank you for the tremendous work that you do in supporting all of us, and the city manager and his office as well. I know I don't say that enough, so I just want an opportunity to give you a sincere, heartfelt thank you for your tremendous work. And in the last 2 years that I've worked with you, you've been consistent and extraordinarily helpful and responsive, and I very much appreciate it. It makes our lives a lot easier. So a big thank you to you, Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you.
Just piggybacking off of my colleague, just want to say thank you for everything. I know dealing with the 7 of us has to be like herding cats and nearly impossible, and yet you do a phenomenal job every day, every week, every month, every meeting. So just wanted to also give a heartfelt thank you and my gratitude to have you as our clerk and being the best clerk there is in probably the world, but definitely in Maryland.
Thank you.
Economic Development.
Yes, sir. Economic Development. Commissioner of Economic Development office is to increase the employment and non-residential tax base of the city through business retention, expansion, and attraction, tourism promotion, community development, redevelopment and revitalization, and other business technical assistance. This office serves as a liaison to the business community and to the Economic Development Committee and support of the local delivery of business assistance to various chambers of commerce, regional economic development entities, state offices, departments, and other agencies for economic and community development matters. This office is responsible for the implementation of the economic development strategies adopted by the City Council. Objectives for 2018 was continue to diversify and expand Bowie's economic base by supporting business attraction and retention. These efforts will support the business attraction and retention for office and flex properties at Melford, Pointer Ridge Plaza, and other commercial locations in the city of Bowie. Located in Bowie is advertising that runs in selected business publications to remind business people about Bowie as a business location. The city is a sponsor of the DC, Maryland chapter of the NAIOP and is recognized in printed materials and events. There is a $50,000 incentive agreement structured as a forgivable loan, was approved by the council and signed by a business relocating with 150 employees, headquarters, to support staff to Melford. Also, in December of 2017, the city's largest private employee in Novalon signed a lease renewal for their headquarters building in Bowie for a 10-year term that begins in August of 2018. And finally, the staff continues to assist the commercial brokers and landlords in their efforts to convert interested prospects into Bowie building tenants. Another objective for 18 was to continue to provide the city oversight and coordination of small business growth and assistance program. The city provides oversight of the Bowie BIC Innovation Center and coordinates small business services providers' resources, including training. As I mentioned earlier, we do provide oversight of Bowie BIC, and the city staff member holds a seat on the board and participates in board meetings. That same staff member also sits the Incubator Client Selection Committee. Additionally, the staff reviews reports submitted by Bowie BIC, asks for additional information as needed to clarify, and forwards those reports to the city council, city manager, and the finance director. Payment to the Bowie BIC is for fiscal years divided into 5 payments: August, October, January, February, and June. Bowie BIC is a major component. Currently, they are located on Bowie State University, and there is one significant aspect of the budget. We'll mention that later on regarding Bowie BIC. The city continues to receive small business assistance and counseling services from the Maryland Procurement and Technical Assistance Program, called PTAP, the Capital Region Small Business Development Center, SBDC, and the Maryland's Women's Business Center, MWBC. The FSC, First Prince George's County Council Financial Services Corporation, continues to maintain the city of Bowie's revolving loan fund. Excuse me. C, continued efforts for shopping center revitalization and retail tenant attraction and attention. Bourbon Enterprises met the city's criteria for a second grocery store incentive payment of $50,000. Harris Teeter. The city continues to work hard with other retail centers, owners, and brokers to attract tenants to vacant retail space and assist in efforts to revitalize our retail centers. And the retail-specific location advertising is running nationally in shopping center business magazines, Shopping Centers Today. This advertising program identifies Bowie as a desirable and profitable retail location. Objectives for 2019: continue to diversify and expand Bowie's economic base by supporting business attraction and retention. These efforts will support business attraction and retention for office, flex properties such as Melford, Pointer Ridge, and other commercial locations in the city. I'd like to delete number 2. That was an error. That was a request, but was not proposed. So that economic development specialist will not be in the budget. The continue efforts for shopping center revitalization and retail tenant attraction and retention. Number 4, continue to provide the city oversight and coordination for small business growth and assistance program. The city provides oversight of Bowie Business Innovation Center and coordinates small business centers, service providers, resources, including training. The significant change to the budget is that the city will provide an additional $20,000 to the Bowie BIC. That's what I proposed, not the 73. That was a mistake. And the Bowie Business Innovation Center, and $100,000 for the loan fund for Bowie businesses to enhance efforts to create and grow businesses. Those are significant budget changes. $20,000 for Bowie BIC, and $100,000 for the loan fund. So this organization has salaries and wages and fringe benefits are primary. Professional services are at $280,200 rather than $233,200 because we had a reduction of $73,000. And otherwise, the revolving loan money there, $150,000 on page 73. Any questions regarding economic development?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for joining us, Mr. King. Good to see you tonight. All right, so I got to delete two things because the two updates actually preempted a couple of my questions, so we're good there. One of the broad topics of discussion that I want to introduce while we're on the topic of economic development for next year, it's kind of a big topic of conversation, but obviously, we're all aware of a little bit of friction that sometimes exists between the city's desire and our correct desire to expand and grow our commercial and residential base, to improve tax revenue, et cetera. Whereas residents often are not as enthusiastic about some of that new growth. We know that there's going to be a tension in the future between the need of our business community to protect its existing retail in many places where we have retail here in Bowie. A lot of those businesses are going to continue to approach us to support new and more dense residential development. And obviously that is something that our residents also feel very strongly about and not very favorably about at this point. One of the things that I'm hoping that we can achieve in the next several years, but ideally that we would start working on this coming year, is to find ways to do pretty extensive community outreach, both as a demonstration of good faith that we're listening, but also to have kind of a two-way conversation about the long-term, realities that the city's going to face with regards to economic development. That for us to protect, our existing businesses in a more competitive retail environment in a world that's increasingly run by Amazon, that we aren't going to be able to just kind of maintain a static community, and that there is going to have to be in the long term some give and take in these discussions. I think one of the biggest things that I hear from residents is mostly just a concern that, from their end, their experience of how we do economic development is kind of a piecemeal, one at a time. There's a new project coming up, and from their point of view, of course, it's all terrible and there's only downsides and whatnot. Doing kind of an extensive public outreach campaign over the course of years where we can have a lot of these discussions, and I know, Mr. King, you participated in a couple of smaller scale ones, particularly when we had in Old Bowie recently, which was very productive. I think that's something that we need to really make an effort to do, to get out there and have conversations and talk to people about, the overall place where the city is in this regard, to get resident feedback, to improve trust between residents and the city, and to get residents on board with kind of a long-term vision and long-term plan about, what, the future of the city is going to look like, and that is heavily an economic development conversation. So that's all I had. I don't know that specifically an objective or anything that I'm proposing, but I just wanted to get that out there and said, and just have that in the back of folks' minds as we move forward.
We have every intention of communicating very effectively, even more so with the residents regarding any economic development opportunity that might affect the quality of life. That was January 3rd last year. That message was received by me loud and clear, which is why we put this communications plan. And between the communicators and Joe Minor and the planning staff, we're going to make sure that we have all more than enough input for you all to make decisions on economic development opportunities.
I appreciate that. And I think, and for me, in big part, it really is a broad-based conversation that needs to happen. I've been blown away by a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from surveys I've done, door-to-door, online surveys I've put out in the last 2 years, and consistently you know, if given the choice between, for instance, you know, let's build some additional residential if we think it can safeguard, you know, existing businesses, if we think it can improve our tax base, if we think it can help us keep our tax rate flat. Given all of the benefits of building new things, residents overwhelmingly and consistently for 2 years have told me they'd rather not have the new residential at all. They'd rather not have the growth. I've heard majorities of residents tell me that they would rather see business blight than have new residential. And I mean, to me personally, I don't agree with that at all. But that seems to be consistently how residents feel, and I suspect that a product of it, you know, it's partially a matter of us just having to continue to plug away at that communication component, and, you know, helping residents to understand that, you know, right now, you know, yes, there may be opposition, you know, to new residential, there may be concerns about congestion, a whole number of things, but making sure that they understand the long-term picture, that if we spend the next 5 years saying no to every single residential project or to every single redevelopment that comes down the pike, that will have long-term consequences, you know, 10, 15 years down the road. And I can tell you in the 2 years that I've been having these conversations, you know, 1 and 2 and 3 residents at a time, the education effort on that front is extraordinary. And it's something where I feel like I need staff's help, you know, and just kind of getting the word out that, look, this is reality. You know, we're not going to be the 1960s community we always were, you know, even if just purely because of the laws of economics. Those are changing. So anyway, those are just kind of the things that I tend to see that seem to come up a lot at my end. It may just be a District 1 thing. Who knows? The water out there might be different. But this seems to be something that I'm hearing consistently, and I just wanted this to be in the back of your minds as well as we move forward and have future economic development conversations. Also, for any of my colleagues who aren't aware, Mr. King took me, this was a couple of years ago, I need to take you up on a new one, on a fantastic economic tour of the city. It was like 4 hours. We hung out in your SUV. I got a little hangry at one point, so he even dropped me off and let me buy some food for myself. And I really strongly recommend it if you all have like a free afternoon to go and do that. Mr. King's an extraordinary resource and has some voluminous knowledge of everything going on related to business, as of course he should. And I appreciate your constant willingness to impart that wisdom with us whenever needed. So thank you for that, Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to piggyback a little bit on Councilman Estev's commentary. The feeling, if you will, on the street is consistent in District 2 as well, and I think, of course, we've seen that over the course of time. It's not a surprise. And I do think that there's a lot of education that needs to go on, but I think there's also a lot of understanding of what citizen concerns are and how we can best address those as we consider projects and the like. And so I think that this is something that we have to focus on. I would say, one of my concerns that I have when I look at some of the efforts that we engage in is kind of the big versus small, almost the kind of the juxtaposition. Maybe it's business development versus subsidy sort of outlook. And by that I mean if we're talking about the incubators and the small businesses, I think that we have a lot that we can offer to those startup companies and organizations and business people in the community that don't have the resources that would necessarily be available to them as a small enterprise that we might be able to afford, assistance for the betterment of the community at large, as opposed to things where we start looking at, for example, advertising and trying to promote the tenancy at shopping centers or at Melford, where you look at some of those operations and you say, hey, these guys are coming in here with Madison Avenue presentations to pitch their properties. I'm not sure that the value add in us running advertising support campaigns it kind of speaks much. I don't think it adds much to the to the effort, and maybe I'm wrong, and, this kind of warrants, I think, a greater discussion, and to Councilman Estev's point, there needs to be, I think, some education. Certainly, I could always benefit from some education as well. And what I'd like to propose is that, we take make an objective to have a conversation to have some sort of a strategy discussion about how our Economic Development Office should be focused, and to whether it's on the big businesses, the small businesses, the nature of the business, or what have you, and what the overall objectives might be, particularly in light of the dissonance with which we are faced in the communities we represent. So I think if we could put something in place for that as an objective for the years to develop, to have a conversation, as a council, to think, hey, is this the way we want to continue, or do we have a plan? And maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe there's a plan all laid out, and I just don't know what it is, which I'd be glad to read and educate myself on. Is that something that can be put together, we think?
Well, I'm not sure I understand, but I think I do. I mean, we've listed what our objectives are here, which is to, one, we want to maintain what we have, the businesses that we have, and try to do our best to keep them vibrant and full, and avoid the blight associated with excessive vacancies. And so that's one of our missions, and our other mission is to look at other economic development opportunities that fit your strategic plan. So if you want, it sounds like it's something that you all want to do and tell us, as opposed to me telling you what you think we want to do. I'm just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. I mean,
Yeah.
right?
I think that there is a discussion that needs to be had to quantify or to list out what it is we want, because I'm not sure that there is a consistency, and maybe I'm the one that's the outlier, but I find there's dissonance there between what the community sees as efforts that we should be engaging in for economic development versus the things that we've been pushing. And I think that I don't know what the answer is, which is why I wanted to have a discussion about it and to kind of go through a process, because off the top of my head, I don't have one here, certainly not this evening, and I'm not sure that anybody else does either.
Well, we're certainly prepared to sit down and discuss the matter. I mean, we have a description of what the organization does and what we think our objectives are, and it sounds like, you want, there should be an adjustment in the policy direction. That's what it seems like, Mr. Mayor. That's what I'm getting. But we're prepared to change our direction if necessary, and just focus on sustainment rather than looking at other economic development opportunities, such as residential housing developments or things like that, which I think that's one of the things you think we're talking about. So right now we do two things in particular. We want to maintain what we have and keep it vibrant and operational. And when economic development opportunities arise, we want to bring them to the citizens via you all who are their representatives, to see if that's what we want to do. So.
Well, I'd like to see, does anybody else share this concern or not?
Sorry.
I'm trying to get a feel for what you're asking, kind of like what the city manager is asking, and I think that might be a little bit like what I was asking before about letting the residents know what we do, because the word that we have put out right now, the prevailing wisdom or the thought process for the residents is that our taxes are the highest in the land, when that's just not necessarily true. So, and it goes back couple years ago, I made this suggestion at the retreat. And it's a phrase, it's, did you know? And did you know is about giving information to the residents about what it is that the city is doing, what it is that the council is doing, what the council is voting on, and giving some meaning and closure, because there's a lot of things that actually happen that go unnoticed. And you really don't get the full benefit of, well, I didn't know that the council had done that, or I didn't know that the city does this. So it's a lot of things that goes along those lines. And it's not necessary that you want to brag on yourself or toot your own horn, I'm not saying that. But certainly, you have to let folks know what you are doing, otherwise no one else is going to let them know what you're doing.
Thank you. I actually have concerns, Councilman Wolfley, changing the objectives too far, mainly because they finger so much into a lot of the small business. One of the main things that we had to battle with the last year or two, or even longer, was losing an Ovalon and the impact it would have with the small business at Bowie Town Center and other places. I happen to agree with the objectives that we have, and I think that they have proved to be very productive over the years, so I would be a little weary of changing them too much, but I think some could be tightened up and, maybe looked at a little bit more. But as far as the appearance of it being more on the protective side and everything, I think it pays off very well in the long run for our small business around the city. So I'm okay with it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one thing I'd like to point out is that on page 4 of of our budget document from is that if you look at goal number 2, is the strategic issues, goals, and outcomes that were set forth by your organization, by your council, and it says that we're to promote the economic development, to expand the city's commercial tax base. And the outcomes that are expected would be the increase in the tax base, increase local employment opportunities, retention of current businesses, and a more diversified business base, and significant progress on redevelopment of aging and deteriorating shopping centers. That's currently what the guidance that's set forth by the city council. So I'm afraid that, anything that this discussion needs to be, I'd love to be involved in it, but it needs to happen with you all to change that direction, because that's what we're working on. That's what we develop our objectives for.
Mr. City Manager, Mr. King, would it be right for me to believe that expanding the commercial tax base will in turn lower personal or property taxes for our residents?
Yes, that it would, raising the tax base increases the revenue and reduces the amount and or number of times we would have to raise property tax.
Exactly. And then going to page 71, looking at the workload performance indicators, obviously the Economic Development Department is doing a great job looking at the retail space vacancy rate going from 7.1% in CY17 down to 3.3% for CY19, and also looking at office space vacancy rate for CY17 going from 19.6% down to 16.2%. Obviously, there's room for improvement there, but if we were able to attract more businesses to those current spaces that are vacant without having to continue to do development that is not favorable to our residents, we would still be in a position to bring down some of the tax rate on the residents.
Yes, we would improve the tax base.
Okay. I also agree there needs to be more education and there needs to be more communication, but it doesn't. We've just complimented the communications team on their improvement over the past year of getting the word out. and this is probably not going to come off very popular, but it's the truth. At what point does the responsibility begin to lie with the residents or the constituents to remain informed of what is going on? Because everything is posted. I drive past many vacant lots in the city on a daily basis, and I see the hearing signs that are coming up. I think at some point, in order for us to work cooperatively with the residents and for all of us to be moving in the direction of the shared goal of making Bowie everything to everybody, if that is not impossible, at a certain point, our residents also need to be educating themselves on what's happening. And if they don't understand something, reaching out to one or all of us or to the city in general. So that's it.
Mr. Wolfley,
I want to try one more time on kind of an explanation of what I'm looking for. When we look just at what happened in District 2, when we look at Marketplace, when we look at Melford, the prevailing feelings on the ground there are that the city looks out more for the business interests than it does for the interests of its citizens. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but I'll tell you that a lot of people feel that way about how things are. And I think some of that's communication, some of that is also listening to what our citizens are interested in and trying to reflect those concerns in our strategy for moving forward with economic development. I think we need to keep that in mind because that is, ultimately been a very contentious issue. And I think that when we look at some of this, economic development and people say, hey, I understand we're going to expand the tax base, but I'm not interested. And I've heard that plenty of times as well. And I think that for that reason, we ought to be pursuing revisiting in light of what constituencies have been saying. And so in my mind, that's something that we ought to be moving forward with.
If I can just follow up real quickly, and I apologize, I've been droning on so much tonight, I really need a different antihistamine. What I'm hoping for, and as it relates, Mr. City Manager, to what you asked about earlier about change in policy, direction, what I think would really be beneficial, because I agree with Councilman Trout that the communication component has improved. I agree with Councilman Marcos, definitely, that, we want to continue to attract business to Bowie. And I do agree with Councilwoman Glass that, yes, at a certain point, you can lead a horse to water, but, we can't, engrave a golden invitation to residents every time that we, have a discussion about development. But I do think the broader issue, as Mr. Wolfley says, is, there really is a lot of intense feeling out there about the development question among our residents. It's the biggest issue by far that I've seen, and it's been consistent like that for a few years, and it's only gotten more intense. What I would hope for that we can achieve over the course of the next year or two is that we talk about our policy, not in terms of a 180 direction change, but just that we as a council actually sit down, and talk amongst ourselves about what we're hearing from residents and about, whether we require, amending some of our existing positions on economic development. Not to say that we're all of a sudden opposed to it or that we want to chase business out, not at all, but more that we can come up with a new plan that will involve aggressively reaching out to residents and incorporating their concerns, and making sure that we can have an economic development plan for the long term that involves a substantial resident buy-in. Not 100%. We're never going to keep everyone happy. Some things are binary. But that would be my hope. And I would say the first step to that would be organizing, some sort of council retreat where we can start the conversation amongst the 7 of us, probably after budget. Couldn't imagine scheduling something now. But I would suggest that as a first step moving forward, actually getting us, and we've had some really great conversations this last budget cycle, and we've had amazing conversations in the past when we hired a new city manager. We work well as a team. I think that would be a good first step. It's just to have us actually sit down, talk about what we're hearing among residents, and talk about, you know, next steps as far as putting together a plan that really does, you know, aggressively reach out and get a level of response from residents that's consistent with, you know, the sentiment out there. So that's just what I would throw out as a suggestion for how we could move forward on this.
Mr. Mayor.
Excellent idea.
And going off of what Councilmember Steph said, I think that's a great first step, and I think a nice follow-up would be, obviously after budget season, but having a town hall type deal where we can hear from all the residents from each of the districts and really get a feel for, do certain districts want more development in their area that won't necessarily significantly affect the residents in other districts, if that makes any sense. So I think it'll be a great idea for the minds up here to come together, but then also in an effort to communicate with the community and to really aggressively get their input to then bring them into the room and get their feedback.
Any other questions? Dr. Trout?
I suggest that each one of the council members poll their districts and do their own town hall meetings. I mean, there's nothing that precludes any one of us from not doing it. We do it in District 4. We got a meeting coming up on May 10th. We're going to be talking about Sky Zone on May 10th. You've already been emailed, Mr. McLemore, and you're invited to attend the meeting on May the 10th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions on economic development? Did you intentionally decide to leave emergency management to another night?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It's
all right.
not-
If you move to police department on 79.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The police department protects the lives and properties of the citizens and businesses while focusing on proactive community engagement, trust building, and responsiveness. Duties include patrol, responding to calls for service, identifying and apprehending suspected criminals, traffic safety enforcement, and a myriad of other things. The department currently has a traffic unit, investigative unit, directive response unit, community services unit, which includes a school resources officer. Also, the department is working toward its accreditation, working with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agency called CALIA. The objectives for 2018 were to continue the implementation of a public safety action plan associated with your strategic plan, and that objective was completed. B was to upgrade the call center to become dispatching capable and operational by January 1st, and that objective was completed. C, complete the 3-year strategic plan that will cover FYs 2020 through 23 by June 30, 2018, and that was will be completed on schedule. The next page is page 80. The objectives for 19 are to hire 2 sworn officers by June 30, 2019, bringing the total number to 67. Number 2 there, assign an officer to the federal task force should be deleted. That mission could not be occurred and was not proposed. Hire 2 police cadets to assume security functions at City Hall front desk. Complete the final phase of a call center connecting public works and community services to a new radio system. Number 5, hire records supervisor to oversee the records management. That should be deleted. That could not be supported and was not promoted. That was a mistake. So the significant budget changes, additional 2 sworn officers at $189,523, the police cadets at $72,430, and a reclassification of the communications specialist supervisor from grade 114 to 117, a net cost of $2609, and police personnel associate from 110 to 111 at a cost of $807. As you'll see here, the the proposed number increase was from 86 to 91. That would be 90, correct? Rather than 91. And as you can tell, between fringe benefits and personnel salaries, there are over $11 million in the police force. Contractual services, $94,000, with maintenance, the automobile liability and police professional liability. The speed camera cost at $473,400, and repair and maintenance of the vehicles, $127,000. And of course, materials, supplies, and such. It's before I open up for questions, I'll say this: to stand up a police department that's mathematically 30% of the budget over the time period that we have without increasing the taxes is phenomenal, and certainly more than commendable. But one could argue that we're going to have to start paying for this police department now. And just being a frank and honest, not a yes man on that one. Any questions about the police department and any issues, and I have the police chief here for you to take those questions.
Councilmember Glass.
Sorry, Mayor, I know I am asking a lot of questions today. First, I wanted to say thank you. You guys are always the best. You are my favorite agency, surprisingly, Chief Nesky and Deputy Chief Preston. I wanted to see if I could get some clarification. State aid for FY 2019, Bowie received $571,150. Does that just go to your operating budget, or would it? Just an offset, okay, perfect. And then also, there were, at the state level, there were several initiatives to improve school safety across the board. The last time you all presented in front of us, a couple of months ago, it was not long after the Parkland shooting, unfortunately, and then we had the shooting here in our state. So it's the state funding that's being given for school safety. Do you know if that's grants that you have to apply for, or if it's money that's just going to directly come to you, or maybe it just goes to the school system?
We're still trying to figure that part out. The ink is still pretty fresh on the document. So we've been looking at it, trying to figure out how things are going to shake out, how much of it will fall to the county's responsibility, and they're going to be taking that piece, and how much we should or could own of that. Okay. And can we do it with, within our staffing means? Because a lot of the funding sources are kind of unclear of what they will and will not pay for.
Right.
So we're still trying to sort that particular basket of marbles out.
Okay. And last question. Are we doing anything within the city that I'm not aware of in relation to human trafficking, whether it's victim services or probably not stings, but preventing human trafficking, or making our hotels aware of the issue, or we have the trucks that line up, not in our jurisdiction, but along 50 and such? Are we doing anything to educate or prevent?
There is a commission, and we do get emails from them and track them. We've had a couple presentations with signs and things. One of the things that we probably need to do is do a little bit better job of having some information on our website for signs and signals of trafficking, just as a general cause. We do check social media sites, as you know, may not know, Backpage, Craigslist,
Right.
All those were seized by the feds
Right.
there. So until we kind of figure out how they're going to route the advertising, because occasionally you would see an ad or two around, but nothing that stuck out. Usually when we do get those kind of leads, we feed them over to the county task force and their folks.
Okay, perfect. And again, thank you all, and thank your entire department. You really do put your lives on the line every time each of you goes out there. And just want to say, at least from District 3, not District 23, that we are very appreciative. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to echo Councilwoman Glass's thank you to the department for your work. In particular, I just want to share additional praise for the Citizens Police Academy that you guys continue to do. I think you just completed your 4th session recently, and session 5 is coming up in the near future, I take it?
Yes, we're recruiting now.
Very good. I had the opportunity to participate, I think it was in session 3, and I just was consistently impressed with the sheer number of officers who devoted quite a lot of their time in the evenings to managing those classes, and they just did such a consistently professional and excellent job. And I also really appreciated, I think the session that I was in was, the time period that it ran took place over a period in the summer where there were going on in national news quite a lot of very intense police-related incidents that resulted in a lot of discussion on TV, but also in the classes themselves. And I mean, the participation of those classes is extraordinarily diverse. It really is, you know, a good representation of the whole city. And I remember that a lot of the officers who managed those classes often created spaces to have two-way conversations, you know, often about incredibly difficult and prickly conversations. And you know, I saw firsthand and was often very pleasantly surprised by the good that was really done in a lot of those sessions, not necessarily directly related to the agenda of a given night, but also just in having those conversations and having that two-way exchange and how extraordinarily positive that is. And so I just wanted to say a big thank you to the officers for that and for so often going above and beyond on that front. Also, just as a quick data point, in a lot of the outreach that I've done in the last 2 years, public safety has consistently, obviously, been a strong priority that residents have mentioned. When I'm asking them to kind of, you know, tell me what services you value, where do you want to see us to continue to grow, and so on and so forth. In the last year or so, I've noticed an uptick in the number of residents who prioritize public safety over other things. I don't know why that is, but I've just noticed that consistently in the conversations that I'm having and data that I'm getting back from residents, public safety just seems to be more in people's minds today, slightly more than it was even 2 years ago. I don't know why that is, but I thought that was a data point worth sharing. So I appreciate the continued work that you guys do, and look forward to continue working with you into the new year.
Thank you. One of the things I will add very quickly is that we are putting out our first annual report here, probably within a day or two, that will give residents a better overview outside of the stats of what we do and the way the organization is structured.
And actually, I apologize. I realized I had notes and skipped one of my questions. You guys completed a couple months ago your survey from residents. You're taking survey feedback online. Maybe I'm just completely forgetting something. Did we ever discuss that survey or anything that maybe you guys learned or found interesting from that? Had we had that conversation?
We haven't had the conversation. We haven't put the survey out yet,
Okay.
the results. I want to clean it up just a hair between that and the annual report. You should get a pretty good picture. We found not overwhelming, but majority supportive. There are some comments that were a little telling as far as some follow-up that we can improve upon. And the thing that you know, we do is we share that with the officers when we talk to them in service, because they need to see how the public is perceiving us, the good and the bad. So that's the only way we're going to get better and improve our services. And we're still trying to clean up make it a little more readable and digestible for the public, because it was a fairly intensive survey. A lot of very data-driven. We're trying to kind of piece it together and make it a little more palpable and digestible for the residents. So that should be coming out around the same time as the annual report.
Cool. And it sounds like you took individual responses and are doing specific follow-up for individual things as needed, and I appreciate that as well. That's very helpful. Cool. Thank you, Chief and Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Chief and Chief, for coming out this evening. I want to say, you know, as you know, guys, you're phenomenal. You're incredible. And a few weeks ago, I bumped into both Chief Nesky and Deputy Chief at the Starbucks, where you had the community event, cup of coffee with the police department. And I stayed around afterwards, and I'm going to tell you this, it went over very well. I'm sure you know that. I'm sure. And when I walked outside, I saw this Hummer this Hummer that had Humvee that had the Bowie logo and everything. And Deputy Chief quickly said, hey, it was donated. Because I was just about to ask who paid for it, but anyhow, it was donated. So one good thing there. My question I wanted to ask, what is our goal? What is your goal to number of officers? I see where you're at by June 2019, you're looking at 67. What is your ultimate goal?
That is a loaded question. I just felt a little bead of sweat go down the side of my head here, but it's really, yeah.
The mayor just.
Questions answered. Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
And again, when we look at our strategic plan, we've got to kind of forecast, is there development coming? Will the bodies make a difference? One of the things that we're looking for, with these two bodies is to boost patrol strength. And what are these folks going to do when we do hire them? So I can't give you an end number.
Okay.
Because that would be kind of arbitrary on my part. What I can say is that we will examine each year as those years come and try to project as best we can. And that's part of the strategic plan. Because as the city manager just, laid out, we're expensive.
Yeah.
And we can, sometimes we have to look at what can the budget actually support and hold, and go from there.
I know initially when I came on board here at the council, it was explained to me that it was based off of population. And I know the city of Greenbelt is a much smaller city than the city of Bowie. And I had a conversation recently with one of the council members there who said there were somewhere around 85 officers, and I thought that was rather extreme for a city that size, but that was just an idea. I mean, you know your job, you know what you're doing, and then the council here will determine if it's within the budget and all. So, but I just had that idea.
Sure he doesn't need 85 tonight.
Okay, we don't, there you go, Mr. Mayor. But I do want to ask this other question, and the mayor's getting ready to sock me when I ask this question. What are your plans, or do you have any plans of expanding your K-9 unit?
We have looked at it. We
Okay.
would like to get a
The mayor said no.
a K-9 that's capable of tracking at least.
Yes.
Maybe not a true patrol dog, but at least one that's capable of tracking, because we do have some of our elderly population that may wander from time to time. We've chased a couple grants and haven't caught one yet, but we are constantly looking for some grant opportunities for another dog. I don't know if we need to put it in the budget yet, but we are chasing an opportunity, and if we do catch one, we'll probably proceed from there.
Yeah, I would think Rooster would need some companionship. The other question, well, not necessarily a question. Situation occurred recently, and I'm going to be very brief and eloquent about this, Mr. Mayor, but a situation.
As long as those aren't a contradiction in terms.
Exactly. And I was recently, within 72 hours ago, called to a residence, and this occupant or this tenant was smoking or engaged in marijuana. And when I walked in, I first asked him, was his name Cheech? Because, I mean, the room was like, woof. So he was sitting there, an older gentleman, he was 85 years old. And my concern that these other residents in this community, senior community, were saying that the large excessive amount of smoke that comes down the hallway, it looks like a horror movie, like the fog just coming down the hallway. Well, he has a medical prescription card. And they asked me, what are our plans? I don't know. I don't know any of the laws. Have they caught up with, if you have legalized pot smoking in your home and it's affecting the smell in your apartment building and the hallways, and actually, I'm not kidding you, when I went into the building, I could smell it in the lobby. And I then later was told that not just this particular senior, but there are a number of seniors that are smoking marijuana. So it's all in the community, but there are residents that are disturbed by this. I don't know if we have anything on the books that are what do we do to offset those or deal with those sort of complaints if it's coming from a residence, especially if it's in an apartment building? Because I could imagine that could be a nuisance.
That is a civil issue that would have to be handled by the management company themselves. There's nothing that is prohibiting on the criminal side or on the law side of smoking in your approved medical marijuana in your own personal domicile. If it leaks out and it's an apartment building, that's up to the property management company to mitigate and install whatever rules they want to install.
Let me ask you this, then how do we deal with it, then let's say if it's not an apartment building, that we're all single-family residents here, let's say it's my next-door neighbor, the Wolfries, and I mean, I'm not just hypothetically speaking, I'm saying, how do we offset that if you have single-family or townhomes or whatever, it's not an apartment building, and someone's in their backyard, their front porch? I don't even know what the laws say if they can smoke it outside of their residence. I don't know how the laws. I said I was going to check it out.
Well, I think the answer that the chief gave still applies. If it's in their domicile and they're authorized to do it, there are no laws to be broken. It would have maybe a civil case between one person or another, or probably some new ground would have to be approached there as far as from civil law perspective. But there are no criminal laws that were broken if the person is on their property and they have an authorization for medical marijuana. They can smoke it in their house, in their backyard, on their porch, whatever.
Wow.
There's going to be a lot of adjusting coming down no pun intended, but down the pipe.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, guys. You do a phenomenal job. In my opinion, you are the best force in the state of Maryland. In fact, the region.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how to follow up with such a mundane subject as retirement for our police force. And I think this is more on the finance side, is the question of when we're funding for retirement, is that into a state level retirement plan?
You want that?
Yes, Councilman, the police department participates in the LEOPS program for the state of Maryland. The city has an annual contribution which is determined by the retirement department, and we also have an administrative fee that works out to be about $12,000 a year to administer that program. Officers are required to contribute 7% of their regular pay as a portion of that.
Excellent. So that means I assume that there are two benefits. One is, I assume that makes it beneficial to the officers that they can transfer between organizations and still maintain their retirement plan. And I guess the thing that I'm after and want to just confirm is that means that I have no downstream risk of having an underfunded pension plan. That's been all pushed off to the state level, correct?
That's correct. They provide us with the annual contribution amount that we normally pay in December of each year. And once we do that, that's our contribution. They provide us with the annual liability that we carry on our books at year end.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And yes, kudos to all. It's a well-regarded, well-received service. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Especially now that I know there's no downstream liability.
Anything else?
I'm glad Councilman Wolfie came between me and the other discussion. Because I do want to commend the police department for the DEA drug take-back program that you had this past Saturday. It was nice, and thank you for providing that service. It was something that I had asked only a week ago, and they said, you ask and it shall be done. So thank you very much.
I'd love to take credit, but it was the DEA that scheduled it.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. West.
Sorry, just a couple of follow-up questions. I should go back very quickly. I should know this already, but we only have one K-9 unit within this city?
Correct.
And how much do you anticipate, whether it's grant-based or need-based, how much would another cost?
Dogs can run anywhere between 6 to 10,000.
Okay,
Then there's conversion cost for the vehicle, which is a couple grand, that's really not much. And the county gives us, provides training free of charge for us.
okay. And something I've recently seen on the news, is the K-9 unit provided with body armor?
Rooster at this point does not have body armor. He usually doesn't get
That close to-
subjected or put into those areas. He does static sniffs.
Okay.
He's not a true patrol dog where he's chasing people or doing anything else.
Okay, and then I wanted to find out something I asked about last year, and I believe Councilman Trouth also, body cameras, the entire department fully outfitted.
All patrol units, anytime that they're doing a police activities in uniform, they do have cameras.
And is it constantly recording both visually and audio?
No, there's certain factors in line with
Privacy
the policy
concerns.
that warrants the turning of the camera. They do not constantly record. The data alone would be very hard to manage, but it also changes, again, the dynamic between the resident. If we're just talking about the Redskins,
Right.
there's no need to record that. Once it turns into a police activity, then it's activated and the person is notified that recording has started.
Okay, and so do the officers, is there something already set in, I guess, your policies, department policies about when they're allowed to turn it off and
Yes.
turn it on? Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
very few, once they're on, there's very few instances where
Where they can turn it
they would turn them off. It could be a sexual assault situation or something that's very delicate in that manner.
And very last question, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the personnel services, the full-time equivalents, and I'm looking at corporals, and it's been 7.0 for the past 2 fiscal years. It's going down to 4.0. Why is, or is that just,
Well, what we did
attrition
is we looked at, people were getting stuck at midpoints because the corporal initially was a supervisory rank, which meant you had to have an opening before you could be promoted.
okay,
So we put what's called master police officer in between PFC and corporal.
okay,
And in between those were 2-year gaps. So if you've been a PFC 2 years, you were allowed to test for MPO. Once you're an MPO for 2 years, you're allowed to test for corporal.
okay,
So that kind of changed we don't have anybody that's eligible, that's been an MPO, that's 2 years eligible to test for corporal yet. So you'll see those numbers change and go up and
Just
down
fluctuate.
depending on the testing results and the time and grade.
And would you be open to any, I guess, Councilmember Gardner and I are both animal lovers, obviously, open to any help with the grants as far as K-9 units and such?
I will take any help with grants that anybody could possibly give me.
Okay, thank you.
I do.
Before we wrap up this section, you all received a document from Monica Betts from the Public Safety Committee, saying that based on their review of the police budget and their participation with the town hall meetings that they conducted with the police department, they recommend approval of the police department budget. Any other questions on this? Now, we'll go to finance on page 87.
Financial information needed for policy administration decisions. The financial information is used to assess existing financial positions of the city as a whole, and particular fund, programs, or departments, or to forecast financial positions over a given future period of time, monitor and control the flow of revenues and expenditures so as to maintain accountability for the funds and to operate the city within the legal and budgetary constraints. In 18, one objective was to maintain the city's certificate of achievement for financial reporting and distinguished budget award. That was completed and we received that award. B was to coordinate the annual budget process and the year-end audit and mid-year budget review presentation. The annual budget process was completed in December of 2017. It began in 2017, and we're in the process right now. We went through that whole process last year, led by Mr. Matthews and his team. The audit period covering was July the 1st, 2016 through June the 30th, 2017, and that audit was concluded without any significant findings in November the 30th of 2017. The CAFR and the Uniform Financial Report were both submitted to the state of Maryland without incident. The mid-year process began in November 2017. Information for each department was compiled by the city manager's office, the finance department, and presented to the council on March the 5th of this year. A review and tests of several time and attendance systems provided a recommendation for the management by June 30th, 2018. This project is delayed due to the vacancy of the assistant financial director's position and has been rescheduled for 18. Moving to page 88, the objectives for 19 are to maintain the city's certificate of achievement for financial reporting and distinguished budget presentation award, and coordinate the annual budget process for fiscal year-end audit and mid-year budget review presentation. There are no significant budget changes for the finance department. Their personnel and fringe benefits are a major component. Professional services involve and contractual services involve the audit and membership in GFOA, and of course some professional service, the armored car services, and therefore that's the end of that particular department. Any questions?
Any question of finance? Mr. Stev?
Yeah, real quickly. I'm noticing on our personal service full-time equivalents, the numbers haven't changed in the last 2 years. I don't know why I'm just becoming curious about this now. Finance director, assistant finance director, I'm seeing 0.7 and 0.8. Are there folks who are kind of filling in multiple jobs and it's adding up to one, or how's that working? I'm more just curious than anything.
Go ahead.
The other portion of that, Councilman Estev, they're in water and sewer funds, so we're split between the two funds.
There you go. And actually, Mr. Wolfley just whispered that to me, so points to Mr. Wolfley for being the trivia king up here tonight. Cool. All right, that makes sense. The only thing I just want to say a huge thank you to Mr. Matthews for your for the great job your department does. This document is one of my absolute favorite things, and I know that a ton of work goes into making this available, and it's predominantly for our benefit and the public's benefit. So I just want to say a huge thank you to that. This is one of the most, and I know I've worked with the Finance Committee looking for other municipal data, and I don't think anyone produces anything quite like this. This is extraordinarily useful, and we have residents who I know read it carefully, and it's accessible and incredibly helpful. So thank you for your tremendous good work and for the extra hours you're putting in during this budget session. I hope we won't make your life too much more difficult between now and May 21. Thank you.
Any other questions on finance? Okay, if you want to go non-departmental on 153.
Mr. Matthews is going to take us through that and wrap it up for you today, sir.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Matthews is going to take us through the non-departmental.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, in this section of the budget, council and mayor, we have items here that are not specifically identified in other departments. So this is almost like a catch-all for other items that the city must do in order to complete its mission. The main components here is debt service, contractual service, and other charges. And as you can see, we have the debt service for the city hall, which is broken down into two payments, or two funding sources, I should say, with our original bond and our refunding bond that we did in October of 2015. The major increase is that in this particular budget, we're recognizing 6 months of interest and principal for the Bowie Ice Arena. And that's based off a $25 million construction cost at 4% over 30 years. The other items, insurance and professional services, they are consistent with previous years. Other charges include the education, reimbursements, incentive awards, reserve for contingencies, and reserve for personnel adjustments. The other two major components are transfers to the capital projects funds and equipment acquisition and replacement funds. Again, we recap the debt service on page 155, and that concludes the non-departmental section. I will answer any questions.
Questions
if
on
there's any.
non-departmental? Hearing none, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adjourn.
Moved and second by Dr. Trout. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous.
Good night, everyone.